Let me begin with this, that I am here because at this particular historical moment, we have got to create a space for principled criticisms of the Obama administration as it relates to economic policy in the capitalist economy and foreign policy in the imperial context in which we find ourselves. Critical space. And then we have to put faces on that criticism so that we have alliances for resistance. That's what resistance and liberation is about. And for me, I never recall, I recall when I first heard Brother Barack speak, because I didn't really know that much about my dear brother. He spoke in Boston. I remember Brother Tavis and I were in the hotel, and he talked about America as a magical place. I said, Brother Tavis, he's going to have a Christopher Columbus experience. He's going to discover America. And like Christopher, you recognize you're not the first one, you just encountering folk already, been here. That Brother Barack can talk about America as a magical place, but genocide, slavery, Jim Crow, Jane Crow, subordination of workers, marginalization of gay brothers and lesbian sisters, violence against women, that's the history of America. It's just that ordinary people mustered the courage and vision to resist in the name of freedom that allowed him to give that speech in Boston. With the age of Obama, and yes, it's true. When I talked to Obama, he called me, I talked for 4 hours. I said, my dear brother, this is my viewpoint, my vision, my vocation. Are you going to be true to the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr.? Are you going to be true to the legacy of Fannie Lou Hamer? Are you going to be true to the legacy of Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel? Are you going to be true to the legacy of Dorothy Day and Philip Berrigan? That's where I'm coming from. And he said, I'll do the best I can. I'll try to be honest about it, Brother West. And he said, will you support me? I said, let me pray on it. True. And my primary motivation was what? We had to bring the vicious age of Ronald Reagan to a close. We had to bring the era of conservatism to a close. The economy with greed running amok, especially at the top, run by plutocrats and oligarchs with no accountability to common everyday people, no concern with public interest, stealing, involved in embezzlement. Just read your business papers every day now. Scandal after scandal after scandal. That's nothing but gangster activity. Nothing but gangster activity. We had to cast a limelight on it. We had to shatter the culture of indifference to poor and working people that goes hand in hand with such an economy. Lives of the rich and famous, land in the lap of luxury. That became the dominant orientation of large numbers of fellow citizens. And unfortunately, and I love the way you talk about young people, my brother. So many young folk began to think, to be human is to be titillated and stimulated with commodities, to somehow think that they are really most human when they live in large in some vanilla suburb involved in some foreplay and orgiastic proclivity. How narrow, how empty. With lives of spiritual malnutrition, moral constipation. Just can't get the good out, just stuck. But in the age of Obama, as it began, what did we see? I looked at his economic team. Here comes Larry Summers. Here comes Robert Rubin and crew. Here comes Jason Thurman. Here comes Geithner from the New York Reserves. The very folk who contributed to the unregulated, unfettered markets, the very folk who justified the greed at the top, you're going to bring them back in your economic team after working people sacrificed so much for your campaign? Who you think we are, Brother Barack? There's hardly a member of the economic team of the Obama administration that has any history about being fundamentally concerned about poor and working people. That's why they can move so quick to bail out bankers and Wall Street elites. Billions and billions and billions of dollars with no oversight, no regulation. Often money ended up in London and in Berlin and in France to reinforce their economic status there. And yet poor people are asking just for a help. Pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. This is free market capitalism. We don't want to move towards socialism. Oh, really? Really? Disabled children asking for $1.6 billion and you don't want to move toward it because you don't believe in socialized medicine. But when the bankers get in trouble, $700 billion and still counting. Socialism for the rich, communism for the rich. Don't insult our intelligence. We see the hypocrisy. We keep track of the mendacity. Our children are just as precious as the children of the well-to-do. Somebody's got to make a space for the critique. President Obama, what do you have in mind with your economic team? We're not impressed by smartness. We want to know what kind of vision informs their policy as it relates to working people and poor people. Here comes foreign policy. Look at the foreign policy team. Recycle neo-imperial projects. That's why I couldn't say a mumbling word about Gaza for almost 7 days when over 500 precious human beings were being crushed. Not a mumbling word. Brother Barack, don't you think that Palestinian brothers and sisters have the same status as our dear Jewish brothers and sisters? It's not anti-Semitic to love Palestinians. It's not anti-Arab to love Jewish brothers and sisters. We have to be willing to take a stand based on human status. And so we end very much like a practical Aristotelian syllogism. Not with a proposition, but we end with a call to action. In fact, we end with a call to adopt a way of life. That's why it's so exciting to see the young folk in the front here. You can see, oh yes, give them a hand. Give the young folk a hand. Give them a hand. Oh yeah. 10 years, 15 years, I'm gone. Brother Carl's gone. Brother Herb, look like he might live forever. He might be gone. We got to pass it on to the younger folk to say you have to make struggle, you have to make critique, you have to make resistance, you have to make reform and revolution a way of life. It has to be a calling, it has to be a vocation, it has to be a fire inside of you that cuts so deep that you can't help yourself. Just like when you on the dance floor break dancing or whatever you doing, you can't help yourself because you feel the music. You got to feel the fire of justice inside of you, that it overflows, so you have a concern about the poor folk and the homeless and those locked into underemployment and unemployment. That's what the continued need for resistance and liberation is about. That's why I'm so very blessed to be in dialogue, Brother Carl Dix. Thank you all so very much.